to provide for their families. Right now, it is under threat of being rezoned, the waterfront, by large developers, corporate developers who would like to bring in luxury hotels specifically. So we are being faced with a rezoning proposal very soon. We know it's coming. We don't know when the official proposal will be put through, but it's coming. The large corporate developers, Jamestown Properties, bought a very large chunk of the industrial waterfront, Industry City. Industry City used to be home to manufacturing jobs. Ever since Jamestown Property bought that area, they have been very clear with their plans to flip the area, not just their property that they own, but the entire neighborhood into the next Soho, the next Dumbo. They've been very blatant about it. They say that they're bringing in jobs, but we're not fooled. The sorts of jobs that they're talking about are jobs at their new luxury restaurants, at their high-end retail sectors. These are service sector jobs. These are jobs without upward mobility, and these are minimum wage jobs that might be okay for someone right out of high school, trying to save some money for college, living at home, but this is not the kind of job where a person can raise a family. So if they are successful in rezoning the section of the waterfront that they own, that is the first domino that falls in gentrification of Sunset Park. Without a doubt, the rest of the waterfront will follow suit. And we have been working very hard to protect the industrial waterfront. We've worked for many years to cultivate relationships with businesses along the waterfront. It might sound funny that an environmental justice organization is invested in preserving an industrial waterfront that is honestly home to some polluting facilities, but because they provide really good jobs, we find it really important to cultivate meaningful relationships with these businesses so that they understand that there is a new wave of industry coming. It's the green renewable energy, clean energy, and we'd like to see the industrial waterfront be the new hub of clean renewable energy for New York City, and we'd like those jobs to be local, and we want to transition people who currently work on the waterfront into that field. So we don't want to see a loss of jobs in transitioning from the types of businesses that exist there right now, which are based in the fossil fuel economy. As we transition to clean and renewable energy, we want to be sure that everyone transitions with us. So we talk about just transition, a transition that is fair and just and doesn't leave the working class behind. That's what differentiates us as an environmental justice organization versus a large green environmental organization. We have, in the last year, dedicated the majority of our time to an anti-displacement campaign because we can see big developer plans for the waterfront, and their plans jeopardize our vision for our community of being the hub for clean, renewable energy. So, we've been preparing our community folks to push back against the rezoning proposal, but Alicia is right. To participate in the process is often, all too often, a community sham. It's a farce, it's not real, it's not legitimate community engagement. I'll give an example. I think it was already mentioned, the Brooklyn-Queens connector. I don't know if folks have heard about this proposal, but it's supposed to go from Astoria, Queens, all the way down the waterfront and stop at Sunset Park. Not coincidentally, the last stop would be right in front of Industry City, and Industry City is one of the large contributors to this project. They've created a group called the Friends of the BQX, the Brooklyn-Queens Connector, and Jamestown Properties Industry City has a presence in that group, as well as some other real estate developers. And it's not a coincidence that this proposed streetcar goes through and passes by all of the developments of these developers. So they're proposing this and saying it's addressing a long-needed transportation issue. It would go through Red Hook. Red Hook has been a transportation desert for decades. The community has long demanded better transportation options, but only now that there are so many new luxury developments starting in Long Island City and going down through Dumbo and through Williamsburg down to southern Brooklyn, now is when they're coming together and talking about addressing the transportation needs, when the community has been demanding better transportation options for decades. But now that people with money are moving in, developers are willing to invest in this, now is when they're talking about actually making this happen. And they've been going through this charade of community engagement, engaging with all the communities that will have this streetcar go through them, and supposedly asking for community input and saying, this is just a draft, we're just trying to collect community thought, and it's a moldable plan, supposedly. Supposedly community input will have influence on how this really plays out, but the truth is it's already set in stone. It has to be a streetcar, it's going to be completely separate from the MTA. There is no guarantee that the fare to ride this thing is going to be equal to the fare of a train ride or a bus ride. They say that it will be comparable, but what does comparable mean? But there's a lot of gray area there. And there's also no guarantee that there will be a transfer from the train or bus to this streetcar. So it sounds to me like something for tourists, for people who are moving into the new luxury developments in Long Island City, if they, for whatever reason, want to go down to maybe Industry City for one of their parties that they have in the courtyard, for Brooklyn Smorgasbord, perhaps. But this is not for community. This is not addressing community needs. This is definitely not going to help Sunset Park community get to their jobs. Like I said, Sunset Park is one of the largest walk-to-work communities, so that means that they're walking to work on the waterfront. But this streetcar would go right through the industrial waterfront, interrupt business that is going on there right now. Trucks go through the area on a regular basis. So all of that will be interrupting what's currently there. And again, for our long-term vision of being the next renewable energy hub for New York. It's something that's needed for New York. The mayor and the governor have proposed reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as a city by 50% by 2030. How are we going to do that if there's no plan in place of providing renewable clean energy to all people, not just people with money, to everybody, and making it affordable and accessible? We need a place to do that, and the Sunset Park waterfront provides that space. That's why it's so essential that we protect it and that we as a community fight tooth and nail throughout the whole process to protect it and put all the pressure necessary on our elected officials, because so far they've been noticeably very silent on the whole issue. So I will leave it at there, and maybe we can open up discussion.
UpRose is really out in the forefront of this struggle, and one other thing that is really important to remember is this administration has a so-called long-term resiliency plan to deal with sea level rise and global climate change. And then you build a new rail line along the waterfront when you still don't know how many feet the sea level is going to rise in the next 30 years, for sure. So anyway, now we're going back to Alicia, who's going to talk about the environmental review process and a case that was actually won. The land use review process is accompanied by an environmental review that's required. It's the City Environmental Quality Act requires that every act that is considered by the City Planning Commission and the City Council before its approval has to undergo a rigorous study of the long-term potential negative environmental impacts. And a lot of us have dealt with these things in the past and tried to challenge them when we see that the environmental impacts are being underestimated or not being properly dealt with. It's very difficult to win this challenge, but it can be done. I spent 6 years of my life fighting the Atlantic Yards project as a advisor on the environmental review process. We lost by that much. But it is extremely difficult. It's It's a process which is only aimed at looking at potential negative impacts and saying what they are. There's no requirement to change anything so that the impacts are less. All right, and that's one of the myths, I think, that, so it's very important to begin with. You have a certain amount of leverage. You can use the process to slow down a development and even stop a development, but it's going to be very difficult to kill it just based on the environmental impact. There are a few examples in history, but let's hear about the one that worked.
Right. This is a community up in the west side, 96th Street. There's a school over there, and the lawyer, his name is Rene Kahtawala, decided to do a lawsuit based upon the environmental review impact study. The community is 70% Latina and African American, 54% had reduced lunch, 15% had learning disabilities, and 7% had asthma, which is above average. So let me just put it in layman's terms. You have a school, and you have a piece of property right next to the school. And just think about this. The land itself is filled with lead, so that as soon as you touch that piece of land, the lead is going to float into the air, and it's going to go into the schools, and it's going to enter into the children's bodies, where it's going to do permanent damage. And this can happen over a very short period of time, 3 months to 6 months. They were going to be doing this development for 3 years. Also, there was the issue of sound. These are children from 3 years old to 12 years old going to school, and the high levels of sound that will be created as they're drilling and banging for 3 years. And so Rene felt that there was really an opportunity to challenge this, because he felt that if you really brought the children's aspect into this situation, that what judge could say that it's okay? And that was his position. However, he was very smart, understanding that you had to start the process in the beginning. You cannot challenge an environmental review at the end of the process. He said that does not work. You have to begin at the beginning so that you can counterbalance what it is that they're doing. And so he had about 7 experts that they paid for. I think he spent like $60,000 on experts who continuously throughout the review process also provided their own expertise. And he eventually wrote it out. They went to court, and the judge decided to rule in their favor based upon 2 issues. There was 5 issues that they looked at. They looked at traffic, they looked at air quality, they looked at noise, they looked at construction, and I can't remember the other one, I'm sorry. I said traffic already. But anyway, the judge ruled in favor of 2 particular issues. One was the noise. It was determined that the noise level was so high that the children would not be able to function well. And there was an alternative to being able to reduce the noise, and that was to provide air conditioning, central air conditioning in the school. But the developer didn't want to do that because the developer said it was too expensive. Yeah, they didn't want to spend the $12 million. So they said, oh, it's just too expensive, we can't do it. And the other one was the lead. She was really moved by the fact that airborne lead is so dangerous, and it's impossible to contain unless you had a tent, which they didn't want to do, again, saying that it was too expensive. So she ruled in their favor, and now it's in the appellate court. But his message, when I spoke to him, was one of a little bit of pessimism, because he felt that he was dealing with a very conservative court. And one of the things I think we keep forgetting is that if our political system is so corrupt, and we are classified as probably one of the most corrupt political systems in America, I mean, with 7 investigations against de Blasio, you tell me, how corrupt are we? yet that political system is the one who appoints the judges. So how fair can they be? And so he's a little pessimistic because it is a conservative court, the appeals court, and he believes that it's a possibility that it can be overturned. But it is precedent. It hasn't happened in years and decades. But he was willing to do this fight. And he said when he walked around and asked people to help him, everybody kept telling him no. The principal told him no, the PTA told him no, the head of the Board of Ed told him no. They said, you're not going to win that. 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 Because there is an ingrained concept in our minds that we can't win. And so we automatically start from a negative. So he had to start from the negative, move up to the positive, and then move forward. And he did win. I mean, he organized his people, he's got the experts, he did the background work, and he's won. But it's at the lower courts, and it's the appellate court that really matters. And so he said they were just waiting for a decision. But I thought that this was a wonderful example of what can possibly be happening. Now, what did de Blasio do? De Blasio wrote an amicus brief in favor of the developers against the children. Yes. Why? Because he feels that if this case is upheld in the appellate court, it would set precedent. And that their environmental impact studies will no longer be taken for truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So that means, as far as he's concerned, he doesn't care about those children who's going to get lead poisoning. He doesn't care about the noise that's going to happen and deter children's development. He's only caring about the fact that there might be other communities that also might be able to be successful in the courts against development that can harm oneself. So do check him out. Do check out his lawsuit. I will give you his email if you want to reach out to him. His name is R. Kathawala, Kathawala, @ORRIC, ORRIC.com. So you're welcome to reach out to him to find out more about his lawsuit and to get more information. I'm sorry, I'll say it again. His name is R, because it begins, his first name is Renee. RKATHAWALA @ORRIC, ORRIC.com. Also, I want to mention the organization that he comes from is the Lawyers for New York for the Public. New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. So it's it's a nonprofit organization where there are lawyers that can help you with different projects, and he just took on this project. I think his children go to that school, so that also made it more personal for him. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry? RENE, Renee. And we will be opening up for questions. So if you do have some questions, I think we might have, how much time do we have?
We have 10 minutes for questions.
We have 10 minutes for questions. So if you want to, you can, there's the mic over there, and then there's the mic over there.
Who's over there?
Okay, who's first?
Hi. Just how instrumental have our local politicians been specifically in helping the community push back against rezoning to stop the luxury high-rise and to save affordability? Specifically, what have our local politicians brought to the table?
Well, I just want to mention the Bedford Armory. If anybody knows where it's at, it's not far from here. It's a city-long block owned by the city. Excuse me. And just as recently, within the last 6 months, Lori Cumbo, our elected official, has given 85% of that land to developers to build multi-million-dollar townhouses. That's right. Let me say that again. 85% of the land has been designated to developers to build multi-million-dollar townhouses. Okay? And then they plan on building a 13-story building, again with luxury development. So you tell me how instrumental they've been in providing affordable housing to the community. Now remember, this is city-owned land, which means that they could have taken that land and demanded that it be 100% affordable housing. Go to Charles Barron and his community. I've been there. All of his land is 100% affordable. We're talking about $500 for a studio, $750 for a one-bedroom. And that's the only community that's actually increasing in black people. So when you see rezonings and gentrification happening in your community, you can bet your dollar your politician is right involved in that, either in the positive or the negative, but they're involved.
Hello, hi. I guess my question was, where do you go to kind of find out all this information? Because you guys talk about like different meetings where your elected officials vote on certain things. So like, where do you go to like get all this information from? Where should I start looking?
Well, that's why we have all those panels, all of the organizations that are out there in the Beaux-Arts Court. You can pick up a lot of their literature. You can get on their email list. I know people who are on my email list, they get all the information about what's happening in my community. So I tell them when the community boards are happening and stuff like that. So I suggest that you sign up. I assume you are on Facebook, you got email. Yeah. So do that. And the organization will keep you informed.
And then, because you also mentioned how you should boo your politicians. So like, and then how they talk about like affordable care housing. How do you know when they're telling the truth? And how do you know which ones are good and bad?
I don't want to be pessimistic, but every time they open their mouths. Well, look in your community. If your people are being displaced, do you need something more than that? If you see, rents rising in your community, do you need more than that? But yeah, you need to go to your community-based organizations who are not in bed with the politicians and who don't rely on funding from them. If you find organizations that are independent, like MTOPP, then they're going to tell you the truth. Follow those organizations. They'll tell you. I tell everything about my politicians. They can't stand me because I tell the dirt. I talk about Lori Cumbo and talk about all the money she got from the real estate, give all of the links and everything, child. I do the works. So you follow me, you'll find out about her. Yeah, that's what I do. But I suggest that you find organizations that are in your community that are not compromised, and you would probably find people who are willing to talk about these issues.
I also want to add that it's really important to get involved with your local community-based organizations, and also go to your community board meetings. They might be really boring. You might be surprised at who's actually going to those community board meetings. I'm shocked at the audacity of people who just moved here yesterday, showing up to community board meetings, having opinions, wanting to vote on things. Like, what? So it's important to go to the community board meetings. Anybody can go. They're open to the public. Get on the emailing list of your community board, because even if you can't make the meetings, you'll be up to date on, say, for example, if there is a public hearing on something about a rezoning, you'll get that notice. So, but connect with your local community-based organizations, because they're probably organizing to go to those public hearings.
I think one other thing